wonderful to be here, and it's absolutely wonderful to be working in partnership with Janet. Philosophically, we're so strongly aligned, and I was thinking as Janet was doing her presentation, okay, I'll skip that slide in mine, and Janet already said that. So really, I think you'll find that the kinds of messages that we have are very complementary, and I hope I can add something to what Janet has so brilliantly shared with you already. Today I wanted to focus, I said, what should I talk about today? So I've decided to talk about parent efficacy. Today I think it's what you all do in the work that you're engaged with, and so maybe we can just lend some thoughts to that really rich and important work. So Esther's introduced me already, and I work at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. So that's quite a mouthful, isn't it? The name of our province and the name of our city both come from Cree words from our Indigenous people, and so they're a translation of that language. So I'm a professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies. I teach undergraduates and graduate students. I work with early childhood teachers who are wanting more specialization. And fortunately, I've been able to design in our master's program 3 courses around parent engagement. So our graduate students are taking graduate classes dedicated to parent engagement. And in our undergraduate program in the early childhood stream, we've embedded parent engagement within every single course. So an example in a literacy course will be going into a home and working with a child in a family in literacy. So they experience parents right from the beginning. I'm also a mother of 3 adult sons, and I think my greatest credibility comes from being a mom. The things I've learned, the mistakes I've made, and so on are part of that story. So I speak as a researcher and a teacher educator, but I speak as a parent, probably primarily lots of the time as well. My contact information if you're interested. We've been working really hard at our university and our province to share our pronouns. My pronouns are she and her, again, working to create an inclusive climate. I also want to give a land acknowledgement. We're not on Canadian territory at this moment, but it's something we're working also very hard to do. We live on treaty land in our province. It was the land of the First Peoples where I live, primarily Plains Cree people. And so we acknowledge that land and recognize our position as white settlers on someone else's land. So my acknowledgement is typically that I live on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis people, and the Plains Cree is our largest group of people. We pay our respects to the ancestors of that place, and we work always to reconcile our relations with one another, to work in respect. So I just wanted to do that here in the Netherlands as well. So Janet taught you about the word parent. Thank you, Janet, for doing that. I use the word parent as well. And I think it's so important to use it broadly, expansively, and just as Janet said, so many people in our world parent. So I think about parent as naming a role or a position as being a verb. It's a way of acting. So we know grandmothers and grandfathers parent, aunties and uncles, people who work in group homes. You were talking about youth who've been incarcerated. Those folks parent too, right? So I want to use that word really broadly. I know that a lot, at least in North America, a lot of people have moved to the term family engagement. And it worries me a little bit because there's times I want to engage a parent and there's times I want to engage a family. They're not the same. We never talk about schools without talking about teachers or principals. We don't brush those roles away. So when we talk about a family, I think it's also important to talk about a parent, because it's a specific, very special, and I think it's very sacred role. So I want to start by having you do some thinking, and I want you to just think back to when you were a child in your own home. Janet's talked about her parents. Think about growing up. And I want to just bring one moment or one memory to mind when you were engaged as a child with your parents. So just thinking about that. How did your parents educate you? Notice I've put the word how there in cutting both. How did they do it? What did your parents do to educate you? Let's just call out ideas. Yeah, go ahead.
Giving you hardship on purpose.
Yeah, making things challenging. Wonderful. Nice example. How else did your parents educate you?
Conversations.
Conversations, thank you.
Example.
Examples.
Role model.
Role modeling.
Learning together.
Learning to get doing things together.
Traveling.
Traveling, yes. Yes.
Telling you about your past lives.
Right. Family history, family knowledge.
Doing sports together.
Playing sports together.
Just books.
Yes, books, stories, all of those kinds of things. Wonderful examples. And so what did they teach you? What things do you know or carry with you because of your parents' education?
Values.
Values.
Music.
Music. It's like
Identity.
identity. Language.
Technical skills.
Yeah, traditions, technical skills. I know how to drive a car not because of school, but because of my family, right? My parents teaching me. Yes. Yeah.
Their posture in life.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm wanting us to think about there is how much of what we know comes from our families. How big a role our parents play in our education. So I hope, Janet, that how I use this aligns with you as well. That when we're born into a family, our education begins the very second we're born, before in utero, even we know that, right? Our parents do all the things that you say. They model, they talk to us, they read to us, they sang to us, they took us places, they did things with us, they engaged us in activities. They set us in circumstances where we had to figure out a challenge or a problem and keep learning. To me, that's education, right? So education begins at birth and it lasts forever. This is the role of the parents. The parents have the largest role in life to help children realize their hopes and dreams. And so that's that lifelong process that families engage in. And so when we think about who parents are and the impact they have, that's why this work that we do with parents is so very significant. They really are the primary people in the lives of their children always. So what we see in that is all of those teachings that you talked about, all of the things we know because of our parents, all of the ways in which they've taught us. Our parents educate us in each dimension, cognitively, emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually. That is that massive job that parents do. So I want to really emphasize this point that parents have capacity. Think about that. All of the things you told me, all of the things we saw through those various pictures. Parents have capacity. And so I know in the literature there's a lot of work that talks about building capacity. And my argument is we don't build capacity, we help people realize their capacity. So when you see 4 bottles of water, each one has exactly the same capacity. Some are full and some are empty, because that's how life works. Sometimes we're struggling with poverty, with housing issues, with food insecurity, with tension, with stress, with relationships, substance abuse issues, etc., right? Sometimes our bottles are less full than other times, but we always have capacity. Parents have capacity. And so that's really what I think when we talk about our work and what we do. How do we begin from that belief system? that parents have capacity. There's times and places when it's harder for them to show that. Maybe they don't show up to that meeting. Maybe they don't tell their child they love them that day. But then what do we do to ensure we start filling that bar, helping them realize the capacity that they do have? So I want you to again think about, are all of you in the room parents? So you can, not everyone I think. So think about, for those of you who are parents, a time when you felt really successful as a parent. Or if you're not a parent, maybe a time when you think back to your own parents and think, this was a really joyous moment between us. I think they would have felt successful as a parent in this moment. So again, just thinking in your own mind, please. So for me, my moments of reading to my boys were my most precious moments. Janet said she had music in her family. I'm guessing there were moments like that of singing or instruments or so on that she might have been thinking about. I loved to read as a kid. I loved children's books as a teacher. I was a teacher for 12 years before I had children of my own, so I had lots of experience as a teacher at that time. And so I brought a lot of books into our home. Our home was filled with books. And my most precious memories, cuddled up in bed, reading together, making those blanket forts and reading. Sundays when we read from breakfast time till supper time in our pajamas and didn't even get dressed or do anything else. Those were the moments that I felt the most successful. Those were moments of joy for me. So thinking about what you said, why did you feel successful? What was it for you that was happening in that moment or in that experience that caused you to feel successful? Do people want to call out? Do you want to have a little buzz conversation with your partner? Let's just talk to the person beside you for a minute. Why did you feel, share what the moment was and why it made you feel successful. Let's do that to give you a bit of a chance. Share ideas. Is someone sitting near you, in front, behind, beside?
General feeling of happiness.
Happiness and attention. That was successful, and for me it was a success. I've done the right job.
Okay, that wasn't very long, but I'm going to ask you to start there. Yes.
It's very funny because during a lot of years, you had to and sometimes you feel nothing really works.
All
And
right, let's
suddenly,
bring it back together as a whole group.
dealing with
And
a
let's hear from some
situation,
of you. Why
they
did
act
you feel successful as a
exactly
parent in
like
that
you
moment?
just
What
done.
was happening?
And it's amazing.
Call outs. Just
And it's so
call outs
good
every
insight
minute.
for us to see
I was on the
that
tube with my daughter,
something
she was a teenager, and there was a lady struggling with a big case. So I turned to my daughter to say, can you help? And my daughter was already there. And I thought, yes, I'm gonna credit my husband with that, but still, yeah. we
So
got
those
successful.
value teachings that you had been doing, you saw them in action. How beautiful. Another example, please.
I really like when they say that I did a good job, just like when we are complimenting them, because I think it's really good that we got it through, that it's important that you recognize your own successes. And it's always really cute that I did such a good job. I'm a good girl.
Exactly, wonderful. Yes, thank you.
sometimes we are trying to teach our children passing values and principles, and at sometimes we feel, oh my God, does it work really? Did they get it?
Yeah.
And suddenly, dealing with the situation, they act exactly like we taught them. And it's so good to feel it,
So rewarding.
that we really, our job was good, was really good.
So we're seeing the why we feel successful. There's joy. There's sort of a sense of satisfaction, a sense of affirmation, those kinds of things are happening. So let's do it again the other way then. Think of a moment, and this one, we could spend months on this one, right? Think of a moment as a parent, think about your own parents when you did not feel successful. So again, just in your own mind, if you can bring that together. Yeah, much easier. This one's a flood and all the guilt, right?
My own there to speak out.
So for me, this represents science fair projects, right? So I told you, 3 sons, adults now. During school, right, they were often assigned a science fair project all at the same time. The whole school had science fair. So I had 3 boys coming home, each one needing to do a science fair project. And they always wanted to light something up, blow something up, all that. And this is not my area of expertise, right? And so it's like you have this much time, you have 3 projects, and you had to all of a sudden have these beautiful projects go back to school. This was my most hated time of year. I would often think, which conference can I go to? Science fair, right? So you're thinking about your unsuccessful or a time when you felt less successful. What contributed to those feelings of a lack of success? So we talked about what made us feel successful. What made us feel unsuccessful? Helplessness. Okay, we didn't know what to do. Okay.
My kid actually telling me that.
Yeah, you're telling me you are not doing a good job. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my daughter has a list.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Why else did you not feel successful potentially?
Not meeting external expectations.
Yeah, you didn't meet those expectations other people held for you. Okay.
I feel unhandleable anger.
Oh, you were angry.
Angry, but not very good handleable.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We all have those stories in our mind, don't we? Yes.
When you see a behavior of your child which is obviously just mirroring you or your wife,
Yeah.
that they shouldn't mirror them.
Right. You see yourself reflected, but not in the way you want to be reflected. Exactly. Okay. So what we're doing is we're talking about parent efficacy. Parents' belief in their ability to form their role or perform their role successfully. So when do we feel like we're able to do it? When do we feel unable? Like you had mentioned, we're helpless, we don't know what to do, we're angry because we're frustrated. So whether parents feel a high level of efficacy or a low level of efficacy, it affects how they behave, right? They lose their temper. It affects how much effort they put into something. I was trying to get out of town during science fair and not put any effort into it. Or how long we persist at something when we're facing obstacles. So that sense of building parents' efficacy, not building their capacity, but enabling them to realize that capacity becomes a really important piece. I was working in a reserve community, a First Nations community one time, doing a talk on parent engagement, and a mom came to me and she was just shaking and she was in tears. And she said to me, I can't go to my children's school because I don't have the right words and I don't have the right clothes, right? So you think of how she was behaving, wasn't because she didn't love her child, wasn't because she didn't want to be engaged, but she was staying away, right? She was avoiding it because she just didn't feel good enough, right? So how do we build a sense of efficacy so that we don't have people who don't feel good enough to be engaged with our organization or with us? In this work by Bandura, they say that there's 4 sources of information that really give parents a sense of how they're doing, right? Esther, you mentioned one of them as we were talking. Where do we get our information about whether we're doing well or not? It's how we feel inside of us, right? Like, so inside that moment of that science fair project, I always felt insecure, unknowing, unable, unskilled, right? So I had that information feeding into me when I was trying to do these kinds of projects. It's how they feel they compare to others as well, right? So I see this wonderful parent over there, and I don't feel like I'm being as capable as that, right? That's a piece. When Teague and Quinn, my two youngest sons, they're twins, when they were in grade 1, they were getting these really crazy, hard, long spelling lists. It was really challenging. And I had a mom call me one night, and she was in tears. She had, her little boy's name was Luke, and an only child. And I pick up the phone, and she goes, "Debbie, is anybody crying at your house?" Right? As she was trying to work with Luke and the spelling words. So she was reaching out, comparing how things were unfolding with her in her home, with how things were unfolding with me in my home, to try and get a sense of her own efficacy. It's about the encouragement and the support we receive, what people say to us in those moments, right? As opposed to when people correct us or criticize us for something we've done or haven't done. So that notion of encouragement and support. And then it's what those physiological and emotional states happening inside us, whether we feel confidence and happiness or whether we feel fear or anxiety. So when I was reading with my boys, that was joy, pure joy. I loved it. I felt so great in those moments. And my emotional and physiological state probably reflected that, right? But not during science fair, right? So just those comparisons of feeling anxious, not feeling confident, and so on. So parents are reading all of these things to get a sense of how am I doing in this moment. We had, even though I was a teacher, am a teacher, and even though literacy is what I love the most, I remember going to Cohen, who's my oldest, to Cohen's school during his early years, and they always have these literacy sessions for parents, right? And they really teach you how to reach your children or how to do, certain literacy things. And even though I knew that already, somehow sitting in that chair with that person telling me how to hold my book and how to read to my kids, I left feeling smaller every time. I didn't leave with a good feeling in my stomach. I left with feeling smaller than when I entered. So I think in that work we do, how are we ensuring that we're giving that positive encouragement and support, and when parents leave their engagement with us, they feel joyous and comfortable and more confident than when they left. So how do parents know, how do they assess, what are some reflective practices that they might engage in? They look at the task, what's required of this task, what is it going to take? How have I done in the past? That's going to influence whether I feel efficacy now or not. And then those questions, so do I have the resources to do this? Do I have the space in my home? Do I have the time in my life? Do I have the money I need or the materials, the money to buy the materials, or do I have the materials? So these processes that parents go through. One science fair, you can see science fair is really traumatic for me, right? It's totally what I'm fixated on here. I remember one year it was science fair time. We were living in Nova Scotia in Canada, the eastern coast, big snowstorm, that big heavy wet snow. My husband was out of town, he recruited for the university, so he was in another country. 3 kids, big snowstorm, 3 projects. And I remember driving around town with the kids in the car that day, and I was willing to spend any money I needed to buy those supplies they wanted because I just needed to do this, right? And I didn't have support in that instance. We can't always throw time and money at things, though. We don't always have it. So again, those processes, how do we think about parent efficacy in relation to those pieces? So let's give you a minute to do some talking and do some work together. Just clustering with the people around you. So again, think about your work, what you do, how you work with parents. So whether this instance you bring to mind might be a home visit, it might be a workshop you're facilitating, it might be a conversation you're engaging in, a session you're offering. And then ask yourself, who was I in that moment? So in relation to the parents that I was working with, who was I, right? Just consider that. Ask on, what did I say, what did I do in that experience? And then, how did I impact parents' sense of self-advocacy or parents' sense of advocacy? So just to reflective, are there ways that I could have enhanced their efficacy if I had done something different? Do I think they would have left that encounter with me feeling stronger, feeling taller? And just have a chance to talk about that and sort of apply this thinking about advocacy. I was just going to give you a copy of those earlier slides I gave you if you want them for a reference point. But let's just take a few minutes and just, cluster into groups of 3 or 4 and have a little chat, and then we'll hear back from you. Now, any thoughts that came up for you? Any reflective comments that you want to share? Volunteer.
I felt good.
Well, we have programs with children, and we often work with parents as well. We have meetings and conversations with them to update about what's going on and how the kids doing. So we're thinking that every time we call, at the beginning we'll say, oh, your child is this good and that good, you have a wonderful kid. But now we thought that maybe we should start with, oh, you're such a good parent, you're doing such a good job, and then continue to, you have a good kid.
Yes.
Or we need to work on that. And it's,
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. So affirm the parent and then affirm the child and move on. Lovely, thank you for that. Yes?
I would like to bring an example of something that happened. I was conducting a project with several schools in Haifa in Israel that were very different from each other. One of the schools was in an area that the parents came from very different backgrounds, from Russian immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants, and parents of very low social-economic standing in Haifa, Israeli born. To break the walls and become more, to engage with each other. And what I did is there was, we have in Israel what is called the Women's Day, a day for the women. And I advised the principal that all the mothers will bring a dish of their culture, okay? And there was a very long buffet when they came. And there were dishes, Ethiopian food, Russian food, Moroccan food, etc., etc., etc. And first thing that the mothers came to that event, they started together around the buffet and they started to talk. What is this? How did you make it? Oh, this is fantastic. And all of a sudden, people that don't talk with each other started to talk with each other. And they started to, the walls started to crumble. And after that, there were a lot of other activities that they're telling about the story of how they came to Israel, etc., etc. And the mothers started to get together. And I felt a very good feeling, and the principal as well, that something has been done, and that will affect also the children's participation on the playground.
Thank you for sharing that. So much time and contact brings trust and relationship. And so any of the work we do as we work with parents and wanting to be really thoughtful about that efficacy is that time and contact to be able to know one another, care about, relate to. So I think you're right, very much the foundation of any of this work. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on only because I'm conscious of time, but I'd love to chat with you later if you don't mind. So just to kind of wrap it up, you'll see a picture on the left-hand side. One of the teachers with whom I work has done this wonderful project in her grade 1 classroom. She calls it Math Lives Everywhere. And so as she works with families and children, she says to them, where does math live in your home? Where does math live in your culture? And then they bring these things to school and they create cultural math bins, and they use the math bins for problem solving, for number, for pattern. And so you'll see how this father has worn his Nigerian shirt and he's teaching a game from his country. So think of the efficacy he's feeling there. He's engaged in teaching and learning, he's engaged in curriculum with a teacher, but in that natural and authentic way. So for me, these are the things that are really important with parent efficacy, is that we keep parents in the role of parent. We don't ask them to be a teacher or to be something other than they are. My concern with science fair is I'm not a science teacher. I didn't know the content, I didn't know the concepts, I didn't know the process. I was being a pretend person. It wasn't me being a parent with my children. So one of the reasons that was so uncomfortable and lowered my sense of efficacy. I think that when we're doing this work, we want to use the parents' knowledge. All parents are holders of knowledge of their children, of teaching, of learning, and how do we bring to bear the knowledge that they have. So I think that's an important piece. So Laddie's father didn't know maybe the math curriculum in Canada, but he certainly knew number and pattern, and he brought all of that cultural knowledge. It acknowledges the holistic focus that I mentioned earlier, all dimensions, right? Cognitive, social, emotional, and so on, not just one. It engages the parent in natural and authentic ways that are meaningful to them. They're authentic, to play a game, to bake, to do things that parents naturally do that aren't outside of the realm of being a parent. It honors their culture, their language, identity. Maria, your example is beautiful for that, right? We're not doing this generic, but we're really honoring the context in which they live and who they are. We work from that place of capacity always. And we ask them, Janet said that in her talk, we ask them what support they might want, or ask them what role they'd like us to play alongside of them. We don't decide it for them or do it to them. We ask them and then we come alongside. So for me, when we're enhancing parents' efficacy, we're following more than we're reading. We're listening more than we're talking. We're learning alongside and learning from. So in the work that I do, I call this a philosophy and a pedagogy of walking alongside. How do we see the people that we work with as knowing, as we are, their stories is important, their culture and identity, and then we intersect with that the work that we do, so that we're always honoring capacity and knowing and keeping them in that place of parent. So that's that pedagogy of walking alongside. So again, my contact information, if you want it, Esther has it so that she can follow up. So thank you so much for this.